We're a little over halfway the 2021 Auburn football season, and with this bye week currently happening, it's a good time to take a step back and offer up maybe half-season grades on how not just the Auburn football team as a whole, but each unit within the offense, defense, and special teams is performing this point in the season. I'm going to share my grades and overall thoughts on why I graded them this way and want to hear from you as well. Welcome to the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks. Our content here and on our podcast network may tend to be Auburn sports heavy, but if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you never miss any content. Thank you to members of our booster club like Doug Easom, who help produce videos like this. I've actually tried to wait a little bit into the bye week to do this video so I could take some more time, digest a few more things about this team, whether it be about the offense, the defense, the special teams, or overall, and really think on why I would grade the team this way for this specific unit. Now, it's been 7 games into the season, a little over halfway, but I think we've had a big enough body of work to sit back and assess where we're at this point and kind of see what the trajectory might be going forward. But before we get to that point, let's actually talk about how they performed thus far. We'll start out with everyone's favorite topic this season, because everybody loves a good controversy. You got to talk about the quarterbacks. There was much talk about TJ Finley and Bo at the beginning of the season, and it kind of was fueled by the up and down nature with which Bo had for the first part of this season. Although the way he is surging under the tutelage of Harsin and Bobo right now, things seem to be trending in the right direction. The good thing about TJ is when he's been called upon, for the most part, he has risen to the occasion, specifically in the Georgia State game. For that reason, I've got to give them an overall grade of B-, simply because there was a really low point there where people were panicking about the quarterbacks, no matter how much, if you looked, it was obvious enough, there were much bigger problems on the offense, but as the team as a whole. So I think it's a fair assessment to say because of Bo's rise and getting himself kind of figured out, a B- is warranted of that because of what we've seen thus far. Running backs, this is a little bit tricky. I gave them a C+. Now, they haven't done a whole lot, which is odd to say outside of the first couple of games. The biggest story, honestly, of this season is Jarquez Hunter and the buzz that he's created about the type of back that he's going to be currently for this team, but teams in the future as well. He's another one of those sleeper pickups in recruiting that Auburn has found, similar to Trey Mason. A lot of teams looked over him. Same thing for Hunter as well. Another big storyline, what's going on with Tank? Outside of the first couple of games, he's been pretty silent. Is he hurt? Is he not? Is there other things going on? We don't know. We don't have the full story. All we do know is the running backs have been a little lackluster, if we're honest. But why is that? Is it because of the offensive line? We'll get there in a second. Or is it simply because they're just not finding a way to produce or not being put in the right situation? A lot of different things to say here, so I'm going to just say C+, because it's just kind of an average performance with a few big moments here and there. Wide receivers. Now this one is pretty interesting. One of the biggest topics coming this season because of the load of talent that Auburn had at this position, albeit young. One of the questions was, would it arise to the occasion? Well, the answer to that for the first part of this season was no, at least for the first 2 or 3 games. We all remember that Coach Cornelius Williams was fired and Eric Keesall was brought in to take over that unit after the Georgia State game. Even though it was a very confusing and somewhat questioned move by Coach Harsin at that time, as time has gone on, it really seems like it might have been the right decision, and that pains me to say that. With drops, missed assignments, not knowing where they're supposed to be on the field, if you're actually supposed to be on the field, the wide receivers were in disarray. Now, players like John Samuel Shanker, Shed Jackson, and Kobe Hudson have risen to the occasion at times, but all of them have had their moments with drop balls and stuff as well, but those are your mainstays at wide receiver. We need a lot of this other younger talent to rise to the occasion and have more than just a touchdown here or there once a game. For that reason, because of the poor start and the way we're slowly seeing things starting to improve, I'm going to give them a D+. It definitely has been, really needs improvement, but there's been some encouraging signs going forward. Offensive line. A lot of you are thinking right now, well, he's about to just lay into the offensive line. And I'm going to be honest with you. I gave them a much better grade than you probably think I'm going to be. Well, some of you at least probably think that I'm being a little bit harsh here, but C-. Here is why. What we have seen the offensive line improve on throughout this season and from last year is their pass blocking to some degree. Now, we've had an entire game where Bo had to run for his life and make things happen against LSU. Since that time, it's improved a little bit. So I'm starting to see some encouraging signs in that area. The thing that really drags their grade down is the lack of production when it comes to open up holes for the running backs. We've addressed this already. I think there's some responsibility to be had by the running backs themselves, but you got to open up opportunities for them, and it hasn't happened at all this season outside of 2 rinky-dink games at the beginning. So for that reason, offensive line gets a C-. So when you do some basic averaging overall, that kind of results in an overall offense grade of a C. And I still think that's pretty generous. It could probably be a C- at times, the way things were going at different points in the first half of the season, but we'll stick with a C for now. Let's talk about the defense, and we'll start with the defensive line. Probably the most surprisingly disappointing thing about the defense this season. And I say that and I'm thinking about defensive backs, but we'll get there. I gave the defensive line an overall grade of C. They've probably had the biggest improvement throughout the first half of 2021. The lack of pass rush was very surprising once we got into stiffer competition. It was a bit of an exposure of the Auburn defense that we weren't really anticipating unless you were paying attention and realized the amount of talent that we let go of or lost in the offseason. But with their momentum building and the way they respond the last couple of games, I've got to give them that C. Linebackers. This is a little bit similar to running backs, except that I'm a little bit higher on the linebackers personally. I give them a B+ overall. They've been very solid, but are missing some bigger plays. Now, the stats are there, definitely. Whether it's Zacoby McClain or Chandler Wooten leading the way in tackles every single game, or 1 and 2, it really showed up on the stat sheet, but we're kind of missing some of those bigger plays, and that's why I can't give them higher than a B+ right now. They're getting the job done, but I need a little bit of extra, especially with the amount of leadership they've had there. They've been missing Owen Pappoe. Hopefully, when he comes back into the mix, things are going to get a little bit more interesting at that position. Defensive backs. A lot of people were shocked about the defensive backs because they thought this was going to be the best part of the team overall. Whether it was Roger McCreary, Smoke Monday, Nehemiah Pritchett, Jalen Simpson, all the names were there. The talent pool was boundless, but it hasn't been that way thus far this season. Basically, it's Roger McCreary Island, and that's about it. There's been a lot of big plays given up, especially against teams you cannot give them up against, such as Georgia. There have been missing players at times, whether that be to rogue calls for targeting, injuries, and things of that nature. But really, this is the part of the Auburn's defense that is clearly the weakest, whether it's because of skill, scheme. We can debate that all day, but D+ is where I sit at with the defensive backs for the first 7 games. So when you average all those together, it actually comes out to a C+ for the defense. And, that might be a little bit warranted because one of the things they've done really well is adjusted in the second half, especially for the last 3 or 4 games. Doesn't take away from the frustration and things that got us into the position to actually have to make those adjustments, but I'll leave it as a C+ for now. Very briefly, let's go over special teams here. There's not going to be a lot of surprising grades. With kicking, obviously, Anders Carlson does a pretty solid job, and he's absolutely reliable when we don't put him in extraordinary situations a lot. When you do that, you put a little bit more stress on the kicker. Bad things start to happen no matter how good you are. I'm just going to give him an A. He did have a mixed extra point this year, missed a couple of field goals, but those were the longer side. So overall, he gets an A for doing exactly what we expected of him. For punting, I'm actually going to give an A+, especially to Oscar Chapman. I think he's the reason that defense has been in a lot better situations than they could have been at times and been exposed less because of him. His average yardage has been increasing over the last couple of games if you watch it. And let's be honest, he's had a lot of practice of it, but he has definitely risen to the occasion. So A+ for him. I'm giving an overall grade for kick returns, coverage of kick returns, and punt returns, and all that kind of stuff of A+, because there have been a ton of big plays here. A lot of these have come in the form of block punts or something like that, but they really have turned the game. We've referenced it a lot. The Georgia State game, this is one that you can really point back to as potentially a turning point this season. So overall, I'm just going to say an A for the special teams. It's been pretty much faultless, with a few hiccups here and there, but that's to be expected. You got to have an almost perfect day to have an overall grade of A+ as a complete unit. So those are my grades for the team for offense, defense, and special teams, and the units within them. I want to hear from you now. Do you agree with my grading? Do you have a little bit of a differing opinion? Let me know down there in the comments section below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this content, please help support it by smashing that like button. If you want more content from us, be sure to hit the subscribe along with the notification bell so you never miss an upload or a live stream. There's other ways to help support our content listed in the description, such as becoming a channel member or a Booster Club member. Thank you to tune into the E2C network where the Auburn family speaks. War Eagle.